So this is a global problem that affects so many things. The environment, as mentioned, the economy, $1 trillion of waste. That's almost the GDP of Australia. And most important of all, it affects food security, right? So 1/3 of everything that we produce in terms of food is wasted. If we would solve this problem, we would be able to feed all those 700 million people that face hunger. So it's quite critical. You cannot talk about food security without addressing food waste and loss. In 2015, the UN introduced the Sustainability Development Goals, one of which was 12.3, around halving food waste and loss by 2030. Many nations adopted it. The UAE also adopted it. And here I would like to first congratulate the UAE on this wonderful initiative and maybe ask the first question. So I know that Ne'ma has been doing some tremendous work around combating food loss and waste. Khuloud, can you tell us more about some of the other measures that you have undertaken over the last few years? What has been most successful and what are the lessons learned?
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here on this panel as well today to highlight perhaps something that was highlighted in many of the panels before us, and that is really the element of collaboration and partnership. I think collaboration and partnership sits at the heart of what Ne'ma does, and this is why many of the initiatives and many of the solutions that we have implemented in the last 2 years have been successful because they have been co-created with our partners to combat food loss and waste. Something else that I would like to really highlight is the importance of behavioral change. Behavioral change and changing some of the practices that are currently leading to food loss and waste have been pivotal. The guide that we have just launched comes as an outcome of our collaborations in the last 2 years with hospitality sector, who have been very responsive to making a difference to addressing food loss and waste, working with us to implement the right behavioral nudges, which are simple changes in the current settings, which contribute also with key messages that raise awareness around the importance of reducing food loss and waste. But it also includes nudges around measuring actual food loss and waste, making sure that we are replacing bigger plates, for example, with smaller plates. Many times at buffet settings, you see people piling up their plates and then just consuming a portion of that, and the rest tends to end up going to waste. And this is why also recently we kick-started a national movement and a national initiative around measuring actual food loss and waste through a baseline study that is actually done in collaboration with Farrelly and Mitchell, who will be talking about this as well, where we really need to start measuring how much we're wasting. So that we can know whether we are improving, whether these practices are making a difference, and whether we as individuals are actually changing some of our daily habits that are leading to food waste. Also, I want to highlight another key pillar that has been a key enabler for us in the UAE, and that is something that was mentioned throughout this beautiful event, and that is innovation and technology. Innovation and technology is key to creating efficiencies in the food ecosystem. One of the key initiatives that Ne'ma has done, we've collaborated with Tamkeen to support the Food Tech Challenge, we created a specific pillar that looks at food loss and waste innovations, not just locally, but also globally, to attract some of these startups and companies to come to the UAE to support us in achieving our main goal of reducing food loss and waste. These solutions, whether they are online applications or new compositing approaches, have really supported Na'ma in achieving its goals. We work closely with many of these AI technologies that measure actual food loss and waste. And we are seeing how it's allowing us to reduce food loss and waste, allowing us to measure not only the social impact, but also the economic and the environmental impact that we are achieving. It is really important that we report on such data to our partners and stakeholders, because we want everyone to see how they can join Na'ma's movement, contribute to the bigger picture, contribute to scaling up the impact that we are trying to achieve, and also contribute to scaling up the awareness. So also a few days ago, we launched our first national awareness campaign, which will be more visible through social media and through our communities. Also, this will allow us to increase not only the level of local communities' level of awareness, but also to their education. So we're trying to instill through educational content the importance of sustainable practices very early on in schools as well. We believe that this will allow us to create a new generation that is more aware of the importance of sustainable practices.
Amazing. I like how the first thing you mentioned is around collaboration and partnership. I think there is a recurring theme across these panels. You keep hearing these two words, collaboration and partnership. It's fantastic to hear what the UAE is doing. It's becoming another benchmark for efforts in this field. Let's take a step back and look at it from a global perspective. So, like I said earlier, many nations have adopted the target of halving food waste and loss. We saw what the UAE is doing, but how are we faring in the rest of the world? Malachy, maybe you can address this question given your global experience.
Okay, thank you, Sabri. Yeah, essentially, the picture is somewhat mixed. There is progress towards the Sustainable Development Goal 12.3. We're approximately 6 years into that, with 4 years approximately to go. So, sorry, I should say 10 years approximately, 6 years approximately to go. And essentially, the picture is somewhat mixed. In Africa, we know the challenges are very different to this part of the world. They're very much in the upstream, and as mentioned earlier, the issues are largely around pre- and post-harvest loss. And those losses can be anything from 35, 40%, or indeed greater. And that has major economic consequences for a continent that imports 80 billion a year US dollars of food, when it should actually be exporting that amount. So I kind of look at this area in a balance sheet way. In terms of liabilities, there is the potential to reduce emissions, and in terms of assets, there's the potential to increase the level of food security in the world. So we do know that the private sector is key to this. And in terms of the role that they play as part of the wider stakeholder group, it's important their contribution and initiatives help to drive towards achieving the objective of reducing food loss waste by 50% by 2030. There are some initiatives out there by companies like Cargill, Kellogg's, Tesco, waste to value initiatives, food banks, distributing surplus food through various charitable organizations. And of course, as we'll hear in a moment, the whole area around technology is key to this in terms of bridging that gap as well. So I think there's much greater awareness around this issue. Certainly governments have been working hard on policy and strategies, but there is a big funding gap, particularly in the Global South, in terms of carrying these initiatives forward. We heard from Secretary-General Khuloud in relation to the particular initiative just being launched this morning as one of many examples, and it is fair to say that the UAE is well ahead and is setting a global benchmark in this area. But I would say this in terms of how we're going to get to achieve this objective by 2030. There has to be way more aggressive action in this area. There has to be deep consumer behavioral change, and that's been mentioned as well. And ultimately, all of us in this room and beyond have a role to play in that, in our own personal lives and how we consume food. So while I think that message has been got across, it really is where the change is going to take place. And also, one last point I'd like to make, we will touch on, I know, again, and that is in relation to measurement. And there is still an issue with measurement. Only 12% of the world's population is where we have a framework, a measurement framework that it's suitable for purpose. Now, of course, the FAO and the UNEP have developed indexes, and very valuable index since 2015 to measure both food loss and food waste in the upstream and downstream part of the value chain. But still there is a gap in many parts of the world in terms of the measuring methodology and process, which really needs to be addressed to help us to start to move forward towards the reduction of 50%.
Thank you. So I heard a lot of enablers that can be used to reduce food waste and loss, improving measurement techniques, regulation, incentives, innovation. Let's focus a little bit on the policy part. Maybe this question can be addressed to Bahar. What are some of the most successful policies, regulations that have been adopted globally that you've seen that have actually succeeded and realized a tangible impact? What can we learn from these policies?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sabri. Bismillah. Globally, definitely food loss and waste management policies are instrumental, while developed countries like Europe, like some from East Asia, Japan, has comprehensive strategies. Still developing countries, and this is particular to OEC, face challenges on developing and, more importantly, implementing such frameworks effectively. From one of the example, I'd like to give Japan. In 2000, it had the annual food waste around 9.8 million tons, and due to adopting the law in 2000 on food recycling law, and which has had 4 around revisions, it reached its 2030 target to double decrease 4.72 million in 2023. And basically the law mandates big manufacturers, businesses, hotels to repurpose their food waste from the food surplus into the animal feed, fertilizer, or energy. It also has the 1/3 rule, which is, for example, if the food has 6-month shelf life, the producer should deliver it to the shelf within 2 months. Another example is from Singapore, which compels large shopping malls and hotels to separate their organic waste from all other forms of waste. And that can be helpful, for example, in Kazakhstan. One of the entrepreneurs since COVID is doing the business in Kazakhstan. Annually, he is producing around 600 tons of animal feed coming from food waste. And one of the struggling part for him is he works with restaurants and hotels, etc. But one of the struggling part for him is separation of the organic waste from the other waste. And government also justifies it so that it cannot regulate the business so that the business will not struggle. But this point is very much important. Of course, there are other incentives like Pakistan One Dish Law 1997, and in provinces such as in Punjab reported reduction and event-related food waste. There is another example from Turkey, Save Your Bread campaign in 2013, more than 1 million actually tons of bread is decreased from the food waste. Also, in talking about the food waste, we should not forget about food loss. In Morocco, the food loss coming from fruits and vegetables, which are basically for any countries, arounds for 30–40% of the whole food loss from the crops. And it subsidized solar-powered cold storage unit for small farmers. So as a result, 20% decrease in food loss. Actually, the Morocco tackles two main issues. It's about food loss management as well as climate change. As well as one of the good incentives, which is mostly on social driven, it's about food banks, surely. In Egypt, there is a food banking regional network actually legally registered in Dubai Humanitarian City. Last year we had the food banking training combining 21 countries from Asia, from African and Arab countries, which is a good platform for experience exchange and best practices. And from now on, we'll be working on 2 countries in Mauritania, and IOFS will be working on Gambia and Mauritania. And among policies, surely IOFS has the Food Security Governance Program, while we had mostly worked on capacity building for the last 2 years, and we had with ADAFSA one training for Asian or Arab countries on food security strategy. Nowadays, we'll be working specifically for the certain countries on building food security strategies. So definitely from the proposals, it's about expanding general food waste management legislation to specifically addressing the food waste. It's about promoting the food donation laws to encourage businesses to redistribute surplus to food. Investing in cold chain infrastructure and overall tackling the food loss management. And definitely all the examples that I've given is about enhancing public awareness campaigns to improve consumer behavior. Definitely, Dia Khuloud, she mentioned about the behavioral changes and the bandwidth tax, this not just that governments, society can implement, which is very much important in addressing food and loss management. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've covered policies and regulations. Let's turn our attention to technologies. So Daniel, what are some of the most successful technologies that you've seen in your experience that have managed to do an impact at the food loss level and the food waste level? What about AI? These days, AI is a very hot topic. Is there any use cases that can be leveraged in the case of food loss and waste?
Yeah, so fantastic question. So ultimately, I think there's 3 things to talk about. And the first one is really about profitability, because what's so interesting about food loss and waste, I think someone mentioned before, it's worth $1 trillion a year. So naturally, you would think, as the food supply chain is mostly in the hand of the private sector, that there's a natural incentive as reducing waste would lead to increased profit margins. And so really profit margin is the very first point. So we need to provide technology that helps the hospitality sector, that helps the distribution sector, that helps the producing sector in the food supply chain to realize where they have loss and waste, that provides the data, provides the reporting to them, so that they can adapt their operations, not produce this waste anymore, and hence have increased profit margins. And so there is already this natural incentive, and I think with technology, with IoT technology, with better prediction, we can make these things very easy. And we've seen many examples of this. We've been working with larger restaurant chains. We've been helping them tracking the inventory more efficiently, do more efficient demand for forecasting. And so profit margins can be increased. It just sometimes needs to be made visible and tangible for the operators in the private sector. So that's, I think, the first piece where technology can help. The second is that in the end of the day, there's so much loss and wastage, there's so much food not being consumed, that just solving it for one part of the supply chain won't do it. So just wastage in hospitality is not sufficient to solve the problem. We must look at it as a chain. There's the hospitality at the very end of it, and retail, and so on and so forth. There's distribution, and there's production. And so as such, we must also provide technology that connects this chain. Because even when at one particular part of the chain we manage to reduce wastage and loss to zero, the other parts will still incur it. And so naturally we have to build a digital platform in which all the produce that's getting, all of the food that's getting produced is registered, is ordered from distributors, is sold again with demand forecasting to the hospitality sector, to the retail sector, so that we have one consistent digital supply chain, because only then we will see where really loss and waste is occurring, and then we can act. And so I think this is really important, and I think it's also doable. And the last point, then referring to your question when it comes to AI, I think we should not do AI for AI's sake, just because it's a hot topic right now, but we should use AI to solve a problem. And the big advantage of AI, what it really is that you may now communicate to a computer like you communicate with a human being. And so as such, the adoption within the food supply chain will be way higher, because we don't need to enforce anymore complex technological ERP systems to distribution. We can just make AI predict demand. We can make AI get offline processes online. So AI will play, I think, a significant role, and we have already seen this uptake when it comes to food waste recognition via visual AI. What is going into the waste? When we look at inventory management, what inventory is really in each of the shelves, in each of the refrigeration systems, what is missing, what is there in excess. When you look at AI and statistical models and demand prediction, so we think AI really is actually in the food system, not AI for AI's sake, but it's really helping to address a problem. And so I think AI will be critical here.
Thank you.
I think I would just like to build on some of the key points that Daniel highlighted, and I agree with him. And this is why Na'ma doesn't work only in one sector. Na'ma actually covers the full supply chain, all the way from farm to fork, which includes farmers, processors, retailers, the hospitality sector or the food services sector, the household sector, and also the waste management aspect of it. Only then we are able to really have a holistic approach and be able to address both sides, or both loss and waste, which occurs at both sides of the supply chain, each of which requires different strategies and solutions that you are then able to implement in collaboration with industry partners from each sector. I think that is crucial to the success of combating food loss and waste.
Yes. Yes, Bahar?
Also, if I may add to Daniel, definitely the AI should be incorporated not only, which is AI, but it's about tackling the issue itself. One of the good example also we've discovered last year, Fazla Gida, which is from Turkey, which is a big platform connecting all the supply chain from producers, farmers to end users. It connects 68 cities within the Turkey. It has 250,000 donation operations within this platform happening, and nowadays he's thinking a young entrepreneur, whose name is Olcay, Mr. Olcay, extending his business to Spain. So these platforms that facilitates and makes it easy for the donations and addresses the food loss and waste management, this type of technologies are essential, definitely.
I think the emphasis here on food waste and loss is that we need a holistic approach to tackle the problem. Food loss is a problem in itself, food waste is a problem in itself, and there are multiple levers that need to be applied, be they policies, regulations, new technologies, awareness, driven by behavioral change, food banks, etc. But from now till 2030, I'm not sure if the target will be met at a global level, but we can be very optimistic by looking at the case of the UAE at this stage. I think we have 4 minutes now, and we can open it up for questions from the audience.
Sabri, this is why in my speech I was saying we all need to act now.
Yeah.
We don't have much time left.
Microphone to you. Thank you.
A project. I walked in a bit late, but you were announcing a new QR code that people can use. If you can just elaborate what you launched, and if there's anything coming up as well with regards to Naama to reduce food waste in the UAE.
I just announced the launch of a zero food waste events guide, where actually we have applied this framework through many events, including the annual government meeting. Actually, the event we are in today is a zero food waste event. This allows us to redirect surplus food to those who need it the most, and it allows us to composite unedible food waste into fertilizer. This framework allows us to create circularity and to reduce food waste that's happening at many of small gatherings and big mega events like this. The guide serves as basically as a guide to guide people to follow simple steps of how they can make their events zero food waste, and in the hopes that many of the industry partners will use it to guide them through the process to scale up the impact of food waste reduction.
Do you have a figure of how much food waste has dropped or increased since you started launching these initiatives by Naama? Or how much do you expect it now after the QR code has been launched today? How much do you expect it to drop?
This is a very good question. One, because prior to Naama, it has been very difficult to measure actual food loss and waste. When we started working on Naama, we were looking for data to measure actual food loss and waste across the supply chain, and there was very limited data. Through the different pilots that we have done with the hospitality sector, applying different nudges, we have managed to reduce food loss and food waste by almost 40%, and in some instances up to 60%, depending on the maturity of some of our partners who've actually have taken advanced steps in reducing food waste, who have used specific technologies to try and measure their impact. But at a national level, we have recently launched a baseline study that will allow us to measure actual food loss and waste across the supply chain, so that we have local indices for the UAE moving forward that tells us and shows us the percentage of food waste and whether we are it will allow us to specifically measure our performance against these indices, to measure whether we're actually doing really well through these interventions, or do we need to create better solutions.
Just to add, if I could just add, one of the complexities around this again is that there's no globally accepted methodology to actually measure food loss and waste. So that in itself is a challenge. Obviously, the global food and agricultural value chain is highly complex, and policies and targeted interventions on one end of the chain in agriculture is very different than what's needed in the downstream area. And of course, in the global south, there's a lack of institutional capacity. There's the whole area of phytosanitary area, which is also very significant in terms of a contributor to food loss. I would say that as Farrelly Mitchell, we're delighted to be working with Khuloud and our team in relation to the initiative to develop a baseline study for the UAE, and obviously a reduction strategy to drive forward as we get to 2030. And I think it's very difficult in the absence of these studies and this measurement process, if you like. It's very difficult for any government to really have the policies that are needed to support the targeted interventions. This is very much a data-driven area, and it is a very, very opaque. The food and agriculture value chain by its nature is quite opaque. I come from Ireland. Ireland is ranked #1 in the world as the most food secure country, but yet we import a lot of food. We obviously export a lot of food, a country of 5 million, and we export enough food to supply 30 million people, or to feed 30 million people. So it's a very complex area. Technology will play an increasingly important role, I believe, in this area, but the measurement part and the benchmarking part is crucial in driving and informing the policies that are needed to address this issue.
But I must say, Malachy, that we have a great opportunity to start by advocating, incentivizing the industry to actually willingly be part of the change process and to join our Ni'ma movement in the UAE.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Can we do one more question? Yeah.
Merci beaucoup. Moi, c'est M. Tigele Gapsubo Palay. J'accompagne la secrétaire générale du ministère de la Production et de la Transformation agricole de la République du Tchad. Je suis parfaitement content d'apprendre que le gaspillage reste un défi majeur dans la sécurité alimentaire. Je partage entièrement cet avis, ce qui m'amène à faire un témoignage de notre pays. Le gaspillage est beaucoup plus observé dans presque tous les pays africains, particulièrement chez nous, dans le domaine de transformation d'alcool. Oui, on récolte, on amène directement pour transformer en alcool. Et c'est un défi pour nous. Et aussi, le changement climatique étant également là, avec ses méfaits sur la sécheresse qui entraîne donc le manque de pâturage, on est obligé d'utiliser le mil pour nourrir le bétail. Donc, vous voyez, on gaspille et pour la transformation d'alcool, on gaspille et pour nourrir le bétail pendant que les humains ont envie de manger. Alors donc, c'est vraiment un défi pour nous. Et les panélistes ont vraiment d'expérience avérée. Et notre pays souhaite bénéficier de ces expériences-là pour freiner un temps soit peu ce phénomène donc de gaspillage. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Alors, mon français n'est pas très bien, mais je vous remercie pour cet avis. He's saying that he completely agrees with the emphasis that we place on this problem of food waste and loss, and he looks forward to benefit from the learnings that are emanating from all the work in this country.
Thank you very much. We're delighted to share some of these best practices with other countries.